Okay, this is a video about intake air temp sensors. Can you see my mouse moving around? Okay, so I've got two cars. The JZX90, when I set it up, it's got a Link ECU, and basically air temp sensors come in different sort of styles, and fairly recently there's been some advancements in the quality of, well, the speed of ECUs, and also the quality of the sensors. And so you don't want to put an old technology sensor on a modern ECU or a modern setup. Now, what would you consider a modern setup? So, say, and Haltech would be similar to this, but I'm going to talk about Link because that's what I've got. In Link, if you're running flex fuel, it's actually called. Let me even see if I can bring it up. Do I have it on this computer? Yes, I do. It's called a modeled fuel equation. So let me open up. No, that's not modeled. Oh, I can just show you anyway. Okay, so let's go. We'll load the default layout. So if ever you see these headings up here, this is one I made myself, but if you want the best layout in Link software, just use the default one here, and it's got configuration, fuel tune, ignition tune, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff across the top, general log, e-throttle, boost. This has everything that makes it easy for you to work around the car and what you're trying to do. So if we go here to fuel main and we've got fuel equation mode, traditional, you've got modeled, and you've got modeled multi-fuel. Traditional is what old school ECUs used to use, where they just go off the injector pulse width. So this table here is actually a percentage of, this is the fuel table, percentage of the maximum pulse width of the injectors. So we won't get too much into that now. Modeled, and modeled multi-fuel. Modeled multi-fuel is a modeled equation that is for both petrol and for E85. And what that means is that it's no longer going off the parameters of the injector. It's going off like an engine model with they have things like charge, temperature, approximation, which takes into account your air intake temperature and your coolant temperature, to calculate the amount of fuel that the engine needs to be efficient, or to run properly, and or it's basically more accurate. So that's why it's called modeled, because it has a bunch of different parameters. We're talking about air intake temperature sensors here, so we're not going to go into. We can make another video about this when I've read up on it a bit more. But basically, you've got all these different factors that affect the amount of fuel, etc., that the engine is going to want for a given temperature, etc. So, when you're on modeled fuel equation or flex fuel, it is ideal to have a fast and accurate air intake sensor. Okay, that's basically it. So we'll close this now because we don't need it. No, don't want to save. Okay, so my WRX, my white one that I had, that I recently sold, came with a really old Autronic ECU from the 90s. Um, although it used map sensor and air intake temperature to calculate the fuel. So it was quite advanced for uh, its era. Americans call that speed density. Um, but yeah, basically the way the engine runs is it takes the air temperature and the air pressure, and it can do a calculation of how much air is going into the engine, and then once it knows how much air there is going into the engine, then it can calculate how much fuel. So the type of sensor that it had was one of these. This one here is actually listed as a Haltech air temp sensor. It's actually a GM or Delphi intake air temperature sensor. Now, this particular sensor, some of them have a 20 microsecond response time. Okay, so let's say this is, in comparison to a modern one, is super, super slow. The sensor I put on my link when I first set it up was this. Uh, it's actually a Bosch sensor. I think it's a glass bead, maybe. Um, but this is one of the more modern ones. It has a speed of 3 milliseconds, whereas this one was 20 milliseconds. Okay. In order to mount this Bosch sensor, this is a Bosch style mounting, so it plugs into that hole, and you need to weld this steel or aluminium boss onto your intercooler pipe, and then this bit with the O-ring seals on this hole here. Now, on my engine, which is a 1JZ, there is actually an air intake sensor, but it's probably slower than this one because old school air intake sensors, air temp sensors, were basically glorified coolant temp sensors. So if ever you go into your software and you look at a graph of, say you do a log of your engine coolant temperature, you'll notice that the resolution that the sensor sort of takes measurements is very, very slow, and it like jumps up and then it jumps up, and it's not very, very accurate. So this is a modern type sensor, very, very accurate. And so then I sold my white car with one of these sensors, and so I had my blue WRX that I've just finished building, and it had one of these sensors. It came with the ECU when I bought secondhand. And look, there's nothing wrong with running one of these sensors, particularly if you're on traditional pulse width type uh, traditional pulse width type fuel model or fuel equation rather than being on modeled. But I wanted to upgrade it. So I thought, hang on a minute, because I'm always looking for places I can upgrade. I thought, you know what? It's got one of these old cool air temp sensors. Let's have a look. What can we do? So I saw one of these, $90, okay? And then I'd have to buy one of these and get it welded on. But I have had a bit of experience with another brand, which is this brand here, SYLTECH. And let's just, we'll open that, and we'll open that. We'll chuck these over here. Okay, so SYLTECH, they actually, before these came out, on the 1JZ I had a aftermarket idle air control valve, and it was made by SYLTECH, this brand here. And they had just released this range of sensors, and I had a look. My mate said, why don't you check out the SYLTECH sensors? So they come in a few versions. You've got air temp, they do fluid sensors, glass fast response. So, oh yep, glass fast response. And see how it says post and pre here? So post goes in your intercooler pipe. This is also a glass one. It's just got a cage around it. But so this, well, this is essentially the SYLTECH version of one of these. Okay, but it's, well, where are we? We're here. It's $50 versus $90 plus the boss plus some welding. So for the blue WRX, I went for one of these. And it's great because that car's going to be tuned on flex fuel. It's now got a fast response sensor, and happy days. So it got me to thinking, because when I got the JZX tuned, and I sort of knew this might be the case, I've got a Greddy intercooler, and they lose efficiency at about 400 horsepower and above, and I'm at 450 horsepower now. And so I thought, well, okay, I don't actually know how efficient my intercooler is working. In my, I'll just bring it up again. In my software, I'll see if I can find, just let me see if I can find, no, oh yeah, maybe it's in here. Yep, okay. We'll just open this. Okay, if I go here to ECU settings, oh, it's not going to crash, is it? Yeah, okay, we go to ECU settings, inputs, digital inputs, no, analog inputs. Okay, this is after I did the drive-by-wire and was having a look, and I've actually got a spare AN temp channel spare. So I'll double click in here, and this is all the things you could set it to. So we've already got an engine coolant temp sensor. We've already got a normal air inlet temp sensor. I don't really need to know the fuel temperature, although the ethanol sensor does that already. Got an engine oil temperature sensor. Don't really need to know about gearbox, diff. General purpose temp, maybe. But, so anyway, I thought, since I've got that spare air temp or spare temp input, why don't I wire up a Pre Intercooler air temperature sensor? In fact, what I was going to do, oh, I just set that, doesn't matter. What I was going to do was I was going to use the leftover one of these from the blue car. But then I got talking to my mate Chris, who knows a lot more than I do, and he said, no, what you want is you want a specific sensor, a pre, I'll go to here, you want a Pre Intercooler sensor. So see how this says IAT Pre and IAT Pre. So exposed, it's got a sticky out bit, and shallow exposed, it doesn't stick out that much. The reason you choose each different one is dependent on how far this threads into the boss that you weld on your intercooler pipe. So I think the one I'm going to go for is this one. Now, what I want to show you is, so here are the data sheets. So this is the data sheet for, I should have changed that one. This one here that we ended up with on the blue car. Okay, so this is the regular air intake temperature sensor. Remember, it's the same as this one here, essentially. Okay, so if we have a look here, you've got different styles. So glass coated, epoxy coated, G E15, G15, E20, G25. And so see here, this blue part here, it has a range of where it measures the temperature best. So if we have a look here, negative 40 to 250, what we probably want is one of these, minus 40 to 150 or minus 30 to 150 for our regular air intake temperature sensor. Okay, so for this one or for this one, we want one of these, an E15 or a G15. For our pre intercooler sensor, the air coming straight out of the turbo in the pipe and then right before the intercooler, so it'll go here, whereas our other sensor is through the intercooler, up the intake pipe, up right just before the throttle body. Our other IAT sensor is here, right before the manifold. So for this sensor, the air is going to be a lot hotter. So we want something like this one here, G25, which will measure up to 250 C, because the air coming out of the turbocharger could be as hot as 100 degrees Celsius. Okay, so the ECU won't use this sensor for anything. All this is, well, actually, all this is for is so we can see how efficiently the intercooler is working. Now, I'll take that back, because if I had enough outputs left, which I don't think I do, I could actually use this sensor to drive a intercooler spray. So if I could probably set up a table so that if the intercooler is not cooling the charge temp coming out of the turbo enough, based on what this sensor versus this sensor is telling us, we could use a water spray to cool the intake charge. That's just one of the first things I thought that we could do. So yeah, that's basically it. The other thing is, yeah, you don't want to choose the wrong sensor. So look, one of these is nice and cheap and cheerful. Well, normally they are. They're normally like 65, normally like $30. This one's not. It's probably because it's got Haltech written in the name. But be careful, because you can get Chinese copies of these. If you don't want to buy the link version of this, you could, here we go, here's the Bosch variant, genuine Bosch, exactly the same thing. There's the part number there, 0280 130 085. Yeah, $55 from these guys. And look, minus 40 to 140. I wonder if we can find, here's a calibration table. Aha, so, okay, this is why this is important. Okay, in fact, you can go to the SYLTECH thingy here, and if I can choose the right one, image. Ah, that's just the image. Okay. See this curve here? So because this is a air intake sensor, air intake temperature sensor, it's really sensitive between 50 degrees C and about -30. Okay? The pre sensor is more sensitive from about, well, it goes up to 250, and I reckon the curve for the graph, the curve won't taper off here, it'll come down, and it'll taper off down here somewhere at 120 degrees, or maybe even further. So, yeah, that's the difference, is this calibration curve. So where the temperature that you're measuring, you want to have the right curve for the right sensor. Okay. If you don't understand any of that right now, down the track it will start to make sense to you. Okay. But this is what it's all about. And in fact, when you go into your software, so here, let's pull up our software again. Let's try and find, just pick this one. Okay, we've opened up our, oh yeah, please don't crash. Okay, we're going to have an air inlet temperature sensor. There we go. Sensor type. Okay, so these are all the different ones. See how there's no SYLTECH? Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to open up a new cal table. So we've got 1 to 3 and 7 to 10. In fact, I think 1 to 3 are for IAT sensors, 7 to 10 are for something else. It'll tell you in the help file up here. Let's just, for argument's sake, use cal table 1. Let's go here and type cal 1. Here's cal 1 table. Here's cal 1 table here. I'll move it over here so we can muck around with it. Can you pull these down? Yes, you can. Okay, cool. All right, so let me bring this across, and I'll bring this across, and I'll bring this over here. All right, so let's see if we can line this up. So -30, we want, oh yeah, look, it says here. So -30, we want 3926. We'll just put that there. -20, we want 2296. So just put that there for now. Should probably be more accurate than this. 1385 at -10. No, 861. Or 861. Oh, that's all the way down there. Okay, hang on. We need to adjust. Our table range. How do we do that? Because look, our table goes to 9,000. And this table goes to 4,000 or 5,000. All right, let's see if we can change that. Probably shouldn't have tried to do this. Oh yeah, look, you can punch them in here. Okay, here. Let me, yes. Okay, what I can do it via this table. -30, we want 3926. And then 2296. Whoops. 1385. Oh no. minus 30, sorry, 2296. 1385. 861. 0. 55 ohm. 24.2. 11. You get the idea anyway. All right. But that will, you can change this somehow. There's a way of changing the table. I'm not going to do it now because it'll take me half an hour. But that is the difference between an old school sensor, a new school sensor, a intake air temp sensor, and a pre-intercooler sensor. All right. So if you've made use of your pre-intercooler sensor, let me know what you used it for, because I am just learning about this and I'd love to know more. So yeah, leave us a like, click subscribe because it really helps us, and it helps other people find my crappy videos. And yeah, thanks for watching. When I think of a new topic, I'll make it as a video.